All right, what's up, GymACT Nation, and welcome to the first ever episode of GymACT's Gym Talk. My name is Kevin Riggle, and I got the opportunity here to sit down with the founder and president of GymACT, Mr. Scott Barclay. So, Scott, thank you so much for taking time. I know you're a busy guy, and it's crazy getting ready for season. But thank you for joining us this morning. And our first topic this morning for our first episode here is we wanted to talk to you about where GymACT started, how it started, why it started, and kind of what some of the history is behind there.
Good question. It's kind of fun looking at history and how things evolve a lot of times. Interesting thing was back many years ago and back in the 70s, we had over 270 plus gymnastics teams in college, Division One, Two, and Three. That's a lot of teams that were competing. And that was a lot of kids doing, a lot of guys doing gymnastics in college, right? So we were pumping out a lot of gymnasts at that time. Gymnastics was everything. Over those years between 70 and 90, a lot of things happened. Cultures have changed, and we lost a lot of programs. And came down in 93 to the point of there were 40 teams left. And the NCAA said, well, if you drop below 40, we're going to drop the championships. Unfortunately, ASU was the 40th team, and we dropped, and that was in 93. So that was kind of a lead balloon falling out of the sky. It was like, oh, now what's going to happen? But fortunately, a lot of good people got together, negotiated, and said, you know what? The championship is still quality. We're going to keep the championship. So that was a big deal back then. The next year, UCLA dropped, and they provided half the Olympic team in '84, and on. So it was a tremendous problem that we were having. But when we did that, I had the opportunity to get into more of what was going to happen to ASU, but we'll get into that some other time. But with GymACT, at that point, we became a college club program, and that's all we were, just club. And of course, back then, club was really like country club gymnastics. There were a lot of clubs in the country. But when they dropped our program, I decided I didn't want to be a country club. I wanted to be a strong competitive club team.
Right.
So fortunately, USAG at that time had a collegiate national championship that was started back a few years before that, because the NCAA dropped the Division III championship, the 2-3 championship. And Mike Jackie was the president of the USAG Federation at that time, USGF, said, you know what, we're going to keep it going. So they picked it up and continued it, which was a huge help to college gymnastics. And it is still there today, which is great. Fortunately, we were able to fit in as a club. A lot of those D1, 2 programs invited us in and said, hey, you're in a bad situation. You can be a part of this championship. Back then, it was a men's and women's championship. And we had about 10 men's teams, 10 women's teams, 20 teams competing on a weekend. It was a lot of fun. So that's how we got started. And there were basically 2 club teams, Arizona State and Washington. Those were basically the 2 only teams that were out there. Washington, under the leadership of formerly Jim Holt at first, who got it started, and then Mark Russo. And Mark and I were contemporaries, and we were going head to head, and we were out there with the same goal of producing high quality college gymnasts, but we just didn't have the resources. We didn't have the funding. We didn't have the medical position. We didn't have a lot of those things, but we were really out there committed to taking the talent we had and raising it up. So it was really fun going head to head with Washington. We've been doing that since '93, and we're still doing it today. And it's a great rivalry. So we saw ourselves, they had the NCAA, and then you had the NAIGC, which was forming around the same time and doing a great job. They have grown tremendously, but they're a little different philosophy. And we were kind of in the middle, but we didn't have a name. We were just a club team. We were a couple club teams out there. In the meantime, I had talked to Heinz Schulemeister out in California, who really wanted to be a college coach, and he wanted to get one thing going in California. My desire was to get something in California and other places in the country, but I couldn't do it. It had to be somebody with some initiative. And talked to Heinz for about 2 years, and it culminated in us scoring a national championship together and sitting up at the table for 4 days. And at the end of 4 days, he just said, I'm doing it. I bought my uniforms this morning. So he started
Yeah.
SoCal. That's how that started. He didn't even have a guy on his team, but he bought all the uniforms. And that's commitment. So with that, now we got we got my team, Washington, you got SoCal, Temple around the same time was dropping. We got these teams all of a sudden, hey, we got a few more now. So this was over the years between 93 and 2017, 17, 18. So in 2018, well, before that, Mark and I used to come to this meet every year, the USAG Collegiate Nationals,
Right.
and we'd sit in a coaches meeting and we'd listen and we'd take it all in. And then afterwards, Mark and I would get together and just sit there in the room and talk about our situation. It was totally different than everybody else was dealing with. And we say, how you doing this? How you fundraising? What's your challenges? Who you got coming on the team next year? Do we have a team next year? All kinds of things that we talked about that we really had in community together. And so from that point, every year we would just spend a little bit of time talking, maybe over dinner or breakfast or just before the meet. But we did get together. And even though we had a great rivalry, we really worked together because we were the underdogs there. So from there in 2018, now we find ourselves in a position where we had a few more teams. We had SoCal, we had NorCal that was starting pretty much right away. We had Temple that Jesse came back from South Africa and said, man, I got to help save my team. He jumped in. And we got a few teams now. New York Alliance was starting to form. So we're up at the Air Force Academy for the Collegiate Nationals. And we said, you know what? Let's go over to meet at the Academy Hotel after the meet and have dinner together. And we're going to talk about our situation. Do the same thing Mark and I had always done. I think it was Jeff Crockett at the time, had taken over. And
Mhm.
so we said, we got to group up here. We got some things happening. Let's talk about it. So a lot of discussions ensued before that, but coming into that night, that was kind of the form night where everything happened in 2018 in Colorado Springs at the Academy Hotel. And we just said, you know what? Here's a problem. USAG is in trouble. We don't know if they can fund this meet next year because of the situations that was happening with USAG. It was a terrible situation. We didn't even know if they'd be around. If they are
Right.
not around, we don't have a national championship. And then we looked at the NCAA. The NCAA at the time was dropping William and Mary, Iowa, Minnesota, and all these things were happening. And we're just coming down on our heads and going, wait, we've got a great thing, but we don't even have a name. We don't even know who we are. All we know is we're in between this and we're in between this. We're not NCAA and we're not NAIGC. What are we? I don't know. So that was the first thing we said. We said, let's get us a name. And it was at that table we came up with a whole bunch of different names, and the one that stuck was GymACT. And that's how we got started there. And from there, we started formulating some organization to it and got a 501c3 started out of it. And so I think we had 6 teams that were starting that off. And that's how it got started in 2018. And from there, it's just been rolling to where we are today with 15 teams and talking about where we can go from here.
Right, right. So, I mean, it would be fair to say that, I mean, GymACT really formed out of passion. It sounds like there were 5 or 6, guys like yourself that just refused to quit. They had their backs up against the wall. They had their funding cut. They were facing extinction, and it probably would have been easier for you guys to just cut and run. And you run 2 other very successful businesses. It probably would have been quite easy to just take that easy exit and be like, well, it's a bummer, but sounds like a group of 6 or 7 guys sat down at dinner and changed the face of men's gymnastics forever.
Well, you hit it on the nail on the head there, Kev. We have a saying that anything worth anything is going to be hard. So if it's not hard, it probably ain't worth doing. I don't know. So I've carried that model on my pocket all the time, I guess, and maybe to my detriment in some ways. But you're right. We did have a passion, and as much as we wanted, and to be honest with you, we tried. We tried very hard to get back with ASU, to get to be a program. It wasn't like we didn't want to be. I
Right.
tried for 5 years trying to get to be an ASU team again, but they just didn't want us flat out, period. They made it very clear they didn't want us. I said I'd raise $1 million toward a new facility. No, they came up with another excuse. There was no way we could be getting in. So at that point, you go, okay, I'm tired of fighting. I'm going to start building.
Right.
And that was 5 years into it. So in '98, I said, we're going to start building something. And that's when we shifted our whole motive from fighting against ASU to get in to be that NCAA program, because we couldn't do it. And again, like I said, we weren't able to be in the NCAA, but we felt we could produce a product that is strong for kids to go from here to here in their
Right.
gymnastics while getting an education. So that's what we ended up doing.
Perfect. Well, Scott, I know you're a busy man. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. Everybody viewing this right now, make sure you subscribe to the GymACT YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button, because next time in episode 2, we're going to be talking to Scott about where GymACT is now compared to where it started in 2018, and how it kind of changed in, the first 5 years with him at the helm. So Scott, thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
You bet. Thanks, Kev.